Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Open Season. I'm your host, Billy Allen. We're running the set here down at Down the Road Brewery here in Everett, Massachusetts. You can pull up and grab a chair, sit next to us, or you can call in and give your thoughts at 502-501-3477. You know the number. We're here tonight on Open Season recapping a whole heck of events that a bunch of us probably didn't think could have happened, as Robert Kraft is among more than 200 people right now, police say, who is engaged in sex acts with employees at targeted massage parlors in South Florida. According to police, every person who will be charged was caught on videotape. This is something that Robert Kraft vehemently denies. And we will continue to see kind of as things go here. It looks like Robert Kraft is going to be arrested on 2 counts of soliciting for prostitution. So very interesting here for quite a prominent man in the NFL scene. And one of the things we'll be burning on tonight on Open Season, as Nolan Arenado got a $260 million deal today. So that's definitely going to set the market for guys like Mookie Betts. $260 million over 8 years. We're finally starting to see a little bit of cash get doled out. Now, Zion Williamson, the most exciting player in college basketball, is he going to sit after this injury, after he blew through his sneaker? We got to talk about that. As the Celtics are on a good one here tonight, facing the Raptors, are we going to see the team that gives us these close efforts against the Warriors and that beats up on a lot of tomato cans? Or are we going to see that team that got destroyed by the Bulls the other night? We saw Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen put up about 80 points against the Celtics. Zach LaVine went for a career-high 42. So we'll be continuing to watch that one tonight. Celtics versus the Raptors. Raptors and Celtics, 2 teams that before the season. A lot of people said they'd be the top 2 seeds, and right now the Milwaukee Bucks are looking like the powerhouse in the East, but Celtics and the Raptors, 2 teams that are looked at having pretty deep playoff aspirations, so we'll see how things shake out in that one. The Raptors just picked up a new center in Marc Gasol, who's fitting in pretty well over there, so interesting things as we go up there, as the Celtics are 6-4 in their last 10. And as I mentioned, they lost a close one to the Warriors, so, not going to penalize them for that. But if I had to list off these names, now they lost to the Clippers, a team that's kind of reeling, no superstar, sold a bunch of their guys, not really looking to make any type of playoff run. They lost to the Lakers, a team that was kind of lost. LeBron had just come back for his first game after being out for about 15. Bunch of young kids in Los Angeles don't quite know how to win, and they were able to put that one together against the Celtics. And then again, the Bulls, a very young team the other night coming out, and like I said, Lauri Markkanen and Zach LaVine just absolutely put together an effort that has shocked a lot of people. The Chicago Bulls are kind of like a doormat right now. They haven't won a whole lot of games. I think they've won about 15 games or so on the season. And they came in and ruined the Celtics. So we continue to get this Jekyll and Hyde Celtics team. It almost seems like when they're missing a star or two, they seem to play a lot better. Every time they've got everybody healthy, Kyrie healthy, you're like, I don't know if they're going to pull this one out. But if it's one where Kyrie sits or Gordon Hayward sits, you almost feel like, they got this one tonight. They'll put it together. So Brad Stevens, as we continue to look at him and evaluate him, I mean, he's a young coach, few years in. Everything's kind of come up roses for him the last few years, Not a whole lot of expectations because you come in as a rebuild, you got a draft, you make the playoffs one year, you win a playoff series the next year, you win a couple playoff series last year, and this year the emphasis and the onus is really on getting to the finals, competing well, and now that all the eyes are on the Celtics, and now that they have a talented team, they're in 5th place. So this isn't something where we've really seen this Celtics team kind of be at over the last few years. It's been a a much scrappier team that hasn't quite been as talented that they've been able to put together for 52, 53 win seasons. So now that they have all this talent, now that they have to work with an ego like Kyrie Irving, a guy that's going to sit out the 2 games before the All-Star game, not hang out with his teammates, and then he's going to go gallivant around the All-Star game and talk to all the potential free agents that he could team up with. Just amazing how you have to kind of acquiesce to these guys, but it speaks to the NBA that we're in right now. In a game where you play 5 positions at a given time, you know, if you can have one of the best players on the court, it obviously does a whole lot more than in baseball or in football. And when those guys play both ways, you know, you look at if you can put Kyrie Irving together with Anthony Davis, you're talking 2 of the top 10 players really being on a team. So when you look at it, you really do have to have the talent, because over the past however many years, how many teams can we say didn't really have a bona fide superstar and won a championship? The only one that really comes to mind would be the Detroit Pistons, and they had 4 All-Stars. So whether you want to say that they had a superstar or not, they still were quite a loaded team and had a good bench as well. So they had also been a team that had been constructed together for 4 or 5 years. So they had that kind of playoff experience. So, you know, the Celtics, as they sit here in 5th place and as the Milwaukee Bucks really look like the cream of the crop in the East, are we going to see the Celtics make that run? You know, I certainly think that the Celtics are due for some type of run here where they're just going to show everyone that, you know, they are a team that can compete at this level. I think Kyrie Irving is just too good, and I know that's not the best reasoning, but sometimes talent just ends up working out eventually. And they have the talent. They haven't gotten the consistent play from guys like Gordon Hayward, guys like Jaylen Brown, guys like Terry Rozier. Terry Rozier is really, really struggling over the past few games. Seems like a guy who, when he gets the starting minutes, knows that he's going to start, knows that he's going to get the ball back, that you know, he doesn't press as much. But when he comes in, he knows he's getting 9 minutes, 10 minutes. He's a guy that hucks up a lot of shots, misses a lot of shots, seems to press. And I think we're seeing a lot of these guys who got 35 minutes last year in a playoff run that are more so getting 15, 20 minutes. Guys like Jaylen Brown, guys like Rozier, guys like Marcus Morris, where their minutes have been encroached on a little bit. How does everybody deal with that, and how do they turn that into a winning mix? It's definitely going to be something that's interesting to see. You know, as Anthony Davis just continues to take over the New Orleans Pelicans with a public trade request that wasn't able to be met by the deadline. So now you look at 2 teams really, the Lakers, who knew that they could all potentially be traded, as well as the Pelicans, who knew they could all potentially be traded. And, you know, you just have to feel like the NBA has got to come up with some kind of solution to this, where teams can just hijack you know, Anthony Davis is 2 years away from hitting free agency and can basically hijack a team for a year and a half because they don't want him to get hurt, and they want to be able to protect their asset because, you know, they know they're not going to be able to eventually keep him. So they got to do something. I feel like years ago they did this where they made smaller market teams be able to offer that 5th year, that additional year, and you could typically pay guys, you know, an extra $40-50 million over the next team or a team in free agency. But that just isn't the world we're living in now. These guys are signing 1-year deals, 2-year deals. Kevin Durant hasn't signed more than a 1-year deal yet the entire time that he's been in Golden State. He's playing on the best team. He's won 2 rings, well on his way to winning a 3rd, and still hasn't signed a contract for more than 1 year. So it's just it's interesting because these guys are all getting max money. It's all a game of they want to be the free guy when you know, the next super team is created. And, you know, for somebody like Kyrie Irving, if he goes to the Knicks, you know, you almost wonder what this guy's priorities are, because when you look at Boston, they've really kind of built it the way that a lot of teams talk about how you have to build it, where you have to bring in that young talent. You have to take a few years really for guys to develop. before you can have those types of trade pieces as well. So the Celtics at the top of the draft making a few picks, and it would definitely be a tough pill to swallow for those Celtics green if you make all these moves with the Nets. You get all these draft assets. You bring in Kyrie. You completely hose or pull the wool over the eyes of the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Kyrie Irving deal, and get a huge, obviously steal that trade. And if you're looking here and you potentially look at losing Kyrie Irving, it's almost like what happens now? Do they sign guys like Terry Rozier? Do they, put more of an emphasis on some of those guys and still kind of think that they can run the team? It would be a huge talent loss. And, the thing that a lot of people don't realize, people may be like, Kyrie there, blah, blah, talking about how much of a diva he is. Yeah, sure, Kyrie is an interesting guy. He is a diva, but you need him here to be able to attract other divas, which are really what those top 10 free agents are. So, if you look at the Celtics without Kyrie Irving, our ability to attract a guy like Anthony Davis, a guy to be able to attract some of those other guys that are going to be hitting the market, I think it goes down significantly. And I think if you want to win a championship, like I said, you have to have those talented pieces. So it feels weird to have to acquiesce and to have to wipe Kyrie's bum and to have to let him go play with all of his friends at the All-Star game while he doesn't commit to the Celtics. But, it's kind of the world that we're dealing with in the NBA right now, where stars can kind of just do what they want and, can kind of hold teams hostage, go for the most amount of money. You can kind of screw teams over and they still want. Anthony Davis is flat out screwing the Pelicans over, just not playing as hard as he could halfway through the season, and he's still going to go get a max contract somewhere. Kawhi Leonard, a guy who completely gave up on the Spurs last year, left to go get paid in Toronto. So never seems to catch up with these guys. And moral of the story is, if we want to win games, if the Celtics want to win games, and they need to keep Kyrie, and they need to be able to use Kyrie to bring other free agents here. I don't necessarily love Kyrie. I think he is a bit injury prone. I think he is a bit of a diva. I think he is a guy that's going to play closer to 62 games than 82 games, but I think ultimately you need him. It's kind of like how we needed Al Horford to be able to get guys like Isaiah Thomas or some of the other guys. So, end of rant there, but all the people who say that this team could potentially be better without Kyrie Irving, think about how hard we were screaming last year in the playoffs when they were bricking about 15 straight threes in that Game 7, and all you said is if somebody could just make a layup, if somebody could have just made it 2. And, that's what Kyrie can do. He's going to miss some of those shots at the end of the games, but he's definitely going to make his fair share too. He's one of those guys who, he's cold-blooded. He'll take that shot and he'll live with the consequences. And, Paul Pierce, Kobe Bryant, all the guys who shoot those shots, they miss a lot of them too. But the reason why they're great is they also make them time to time. And Kyrie, definitely makes. If you don't have Kyrie, you really don't have a lot to go to when it's crunch time, and that's ultimately what happens in the playoffs. When things slow down, effort can get you through the regular season. You can win 50, 55 games off effort, off coming out and being well coached, but when things slow down in the half court and you've got guys playing the hardest they absolutely can both ways, you need that star to be able to create offense sometimes. And we definitely saw it happen with the Celtics last year in the playoffs, which is why anytime I hear somebody suggest that this team would be better without Kyrie, I just feel like they don't have the greatest understanding of the NBA and how it works. That's what you need to be successful. Kyrie's not like a true number one, but he's pretty much as close as it gets to that. And look at the Houston Rockets. You really just have to sign who you possibly can at that level. You don't really get to make your choices in free agents. You kind of just sign who you can sign. They signed James Harden and Chris Paul, two guys who completely dominate the ball. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. but you sign stars because you sign who you can get, really. And I believe the Celtics have to do that, especially if they want to have any type of positive success in this Anthony Davis trade. You know, Anthony Davis is not going to want to come to the Celtics if they don't have any other superstars here. If they don't have Kyrie, what's the incentive to come to Boston? So that's my take on the whole Kyrie drama. And, you know, I know it's a bit weird to cater to these guys, but I think we have to continue to do it. It's past the trade deadline, so really the most we can do is kind of try to make Kyrie happy and try to make him someone that will advocate for free agents to come to Boston. So those are my thoughts on Kyrie. We're taking all your thoughts at 502-501-3477. We'll be keeping tabs on this Boston and Raptors game. Going to have to take a look at it next time I get a chance here. We'll definitely look to get you a score update. As we get into a few more things here in terms of some of the contracts that have been doled out in the MLB, as we saw Nolan Arenado get an 8-year, $260 million deal with the Rockies today. We saw Manny Machado get a $300 million deal for 10 years with the San Diego Padres. And it continues to sound like things are inching closer with Bryce Harper and the Phillies in terms of a negotiation there. We don't really know the details, but it seems like Bryce Harper has pretty much met with every single team. So I feel like he's got all the offers in hand. It's just amazing what these guys can get at this point. Manny Machado was a guy who was dogging it in the World Series, and there's still teams out there willing to pay him $300 million over 10 years. So, you know, lots of money going out there right now, and it definitely brings up a couple things for Red Sox fans to consider, because Chris Sale is going to be a free agent next year. Mookie Betts is going to be a free agent in a couple years. And when you see guys like Nolan Arenado getting contracts like that, one of the best young guys in the game, you know, you definitely think that Mookie Betts is going to be angling for something similar, if not more. And when you look at the deal that David Price signed, you got to assume that Chris Sale's looking at something like that, if not something more. So, you know, as we continue to hear from the winter meetings and the signings, and, you know, the interesting thing is with free agency in the MLB this year, we've really kind of had like a back to the equilibrium point where there was such a time period where those guys were getting those deals until they were 42, 43 years old, getting paid $25 million. And it's really been a standstill this year where, you know, there's only been like 2 of the top 25 players that have actually been signed. You know, so, you know, at one point Steve Pearce was like the highest signed free agent, the guy that, you know, the utility player for the Sox, because there just haven't been a whole lot of signings. Teams are waiting and, you know, making guys kind of have to swallow their pride a little bit. You know, we look at a guy like Craig Kimbrell, who had a contract demand of, you know, was looking for something in the $95 million range, and it seems like no team's really giving him anything north of like 1 year and $11 million. So looks like a lot of guys are going to have to be a little bit more patient than years past, because I think teams are kind of coming around to the fact that signing some of these guys to contracts when they're 34, 35, 8-year deals that's going to take them to year 42, 43, those deals don't really pay. You know, you look at A-Rod, Pujols, how many guys have signed those deals, and it just doesn't quite pan out. You know, those guys are talented till they're 35, but to ask for that type of production for $45 million annually of production from them when they're 42, 43 years old, it's not realistic. Barry Bonds was on more roids than anything, and he still couldn't even put up those stats at that age. So, I mean, what are you really asking for? And I think there's really been quite a big market correction this year. As, like I said, it's things have really slowed down. And a year ago at this time, we were talking about how Manny Machado and Bryce Harper were going to get over $400 million. It looks like they're both going to settle on $300 million. So, you know, for those guys, they're going to be living the life. But I mean, it's definitely it's $100 million less than they were looking at about a year ago. So, you know, it's not pennies, but I definitely feel like teams are slowing down in terms of offering those big deals to some of those free agents that, typically, like after you have a good playoff run, or once you're a little bit older, sometimes those teams get stuck in the moment. They throw a big contract to one of those guys, like the Sox when they did it to Panda, and you get caught up in the moment, and then you just have some really bad salary cap problems, and it can be tough. But speaking of players that are going to get big contract offers, let's switch gears to the NFL for a second, as Le'Veon Bell has a few offers from some teams. It looks like the Le'Veon Bell sweepstakes is definitely kind of, well, I wouldn't say it's coming to any type of end, because, I didn't think it was going to go this entire year where he held out for $17 million. But there's a couple teams that are putting in offers on him. Green Bay being one team that's put in a 4-year, $60 million offer. So $15 million a year at $49 million guaranteed when he signs that deal. The Houston Texans have offered a 5-year, $75 million deal with $50 million guaranteed. And the Jets have offered a 4-year, $59 million deal with $46 million guaranteed. And I think obviously you have to take that Houston Texans deal, 5 years, $75 million. He's basically guaranteeing himself. He's 26, 27, guaranteeing himself $15 million a year at the running back position, $50 million guaranteed. If he signs that deal, just to give you some perspective, Todd Gurley, who signed the biggest deal for a running back, I think it had $21 million in guarantees. If he signs that deal, the moment he signs the deal with the Texans, he'd be guaranteed $50 million at the running back position, which we all know has a shelf life of 3 to 4 years. So, the Texans definitely going out there looking to compete and bring in an all-star, but will it come for a price that ultimately doesn't pay? We'll definitely have to see. I don't think you can totally throw the Raiders out from putting some type of offer out there for him as well. But Le'Veon Bell, looking like that year of holding off still isn't going to really affect the value of the contract that he's going to get. And, like I said, the Texans offering 5 years, $75 million at the running back position. That's quite a lot to guarantee $50 million to a running back who's been in the league for 6-7 years. That's a lot. Now, how about a nice little comeback story? Trent Richardson. I'm sure we all remember him. We all tried to pick him up every time he got cut from a new team, and thought that for some reason his success at Alabama would have to translate at the NFL level. I remember just thinking he was the most jacked thing. He was the fastest. He was the most athletic guy I saw in college that year. And then just going to the NFL, it was crazy. He couldn't find any running room at all. But in the new AAF league, Trent Richardson had 3 touchdowns in his last game. So potentially a comeback story. I doubt too many guys are going to come from the AAF and go to the NFL, if any, but it's funny that Trent Richardson's still out there playing at some level, still trying to be competitive, and just reminds me of, God, how much of a bust he was and how good he was at Alabama. I remember hearing stories that they wouldn't let him lift over his head anymore because his muscles were getting too big or whatever, and it's just crazy how that guy was not able to translate at the NFL level. Like I said, I don't think I saw. He was bigger than Adrian Peterson, faster than Adrian Peterson, and it just didn't really translate at the NFL level, which has always amazed me. So, I don't know. Maybe this AAF is the start of something new. Now, going back to the NBA for a second here, as we look at a couple of things. The Houston Rockets are playing at an incredible level recently. They took down the Warriors without James Harden. They bring on Kenneth Faried, who was a bench player for the Nets, averaging 5 points, 3 boards. He's come on to the Rockets, and in 15 games, he's averaging 15.5 points, 9.5 boards. both career highs for him, and he's played 9 years in the league. This guy was essentially a DNP with the Nets. I feel like every year the Houston Rockets bring in a guy in the second half of the season who was completely, didn't have any impact on the first half. Last year, if you remember, Gerald Green went to the Houston Rockets in the second half of the year, averaged about 15 points as well off the bench. So, they're truly playing some great basketball. They started off in a bad position and, kind of lost a lot of games out of the beginning. But, James Harden, well, I'm not going to vote him for the MVP or anything like that. You definitely have to admit that they're playing some pretty good ball. And Chris Paul has really looked good post-injury coming back too. So continue to see good things from him as he moves up the rankings in assists. I think he just hit 9,000 on his career the other day. And in terms of some other pretty exciting milestones, LeBron James becomes the first player to hit top 10 points and top 10 assists all time. So, you look at some of the names that are on there. He's got as many assists as guys like Gary Payton and, as many points as guys like Michael Jordan. So it's truly incredible, some of those statistics when you look at them laid out. And for someone who can score that much, to be able to pass that much, it's some pretty incredible stuff. I feel like LeBron isn't even really looked at as a scorer. He's probably going to break every scoring record there is, at least for over a career. Now, one career that's just been a catastrophe for a while now has been Ja Rule's, right? Ever since 50 Cent started getting after him back in the day and, kind of murdered his career back there with the rap lyrics and all that, making fun of him. I remember actually, the funniest thing he did was, a couple months ago, there was a Ja Rule concert. 50 Cent bought the first, 3 or 4 rows to the concert and just didn't show up so that Ja Rule wouldn't have anybody in the first few rows. Now, Ja Rule performed at halftime on Saturday between the Minnesota Timberwolves and Milwaukee Bucks. And apparently, when he started going, the fans really weren't into it. He said, "Are we ready?" And, nobody really, stopped or anything. Once he started going, he's like, I guess not. And it kept going. And Giannis Antetokounmpo actually came out and started taking shots in the middle of, it just started, warming up in the middle of it. So Ja Rule, what does Ja Rule do? Well, what do most logical people do when faced with something like that? Ja Rule went to Twitter afterwards and posted that, saying that the Minnesota Timberwolves won't win for the next 30 years and that he's put a curse on them, and said that Karl Anthony Towns isn't going to stay there. Well, my God, I would definitely be afraid to be cursed by Ja Rule because, that guy definitely seems to have his way with the world. So I just thought that was hysterical that Ja Rule is still getting made fun of at halftimes and still getting run out of stadiums. Even when it's the Milwaukee and Minnesota friendly fans, nobody's really loving Ja Rule anymore. So I don't know. I think he's just got to go back to collecting those royalties with Ashanti. Now, the LA Lakers, we talked about them a little bit a minute ago with LeBron, and also about how they came in. They beat the Celtics. Looking at this Lakers team, I think a lot of people said any team LeBron goes to, they're going to win 50 games. They're going to make the playoffs. You start looking around, and with some of the fractured relationships kind of due to the trade, some of LeBron's comments about some of the younger players, not quite knowing what it takes to win. And, you kind of look around and you're wondering if this is the first LeBron team in 13 years that could potentially not make the playoffs. You got LeBron saying a whole bunch of things where he's got to kind of kick up his effort a little bit earlier than he would have liked. And, all of it sounds a bit nauseating, but it's something where we're actually looking at, I think a lot of people saw that move and saw that the Lakers would probably be competing with the Warriors, probably figured that they were going to have some type of high caliber move in like a Kawhi Leonard or Anthony Davis. And the Lakers now, you kind of look at them and you wonder how attractive are they if they can't move those pieces. I mean, they pretty much put their entire team on the table for Anthony Davis. And that package was no slouch. I mean, Kyle Kuzma, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, as well as picks and as well as players. I mean, you're not going to get a better offer than that. So you look at this Lakers team, a team that I think a lot of people had high hopes for, a team that was going to kind of come out of the dumps that it had been in the last few years, kind of post-Kobe. But, you know, it's starting to get a little bit too late as some teams continue to, you know, put the nail in them a little bit down the road here. And you wonder if this Los Angeles team quite has what it takes with all these young guys to be able to make that type of playoff push. It's definitely a situation that LeBron's not used to. He's used to getting with these veterans, these guys that, you know, they know what it takes to win. They have that hunger. And, you know, when it's your first or second year, not saying that you don't have less hunger, but it's a little bit more about building yourself, and something that LeBron hasn't really had to deal with over the past few years. So we'll see how that works out for him, and we'll see how that works out for the Lakers, a team that I think a lot of people had high hopes for, but is, you know, really treading on the line right now in terms of making the playoffs. So we'll see what happens there. As you know, when we talk about the NFL and getting back to some of the more news, kind of, Randy Gregory was suspended again indefinitely. This is a guy that's been suspended multiple times for drug violations, and guy that kind of got himself right with the Cowboys this year. And when you're saying kind of got himself right, I think he played in like 6 games and registered a couple sacks. This is a guy that, I don't know if anyone remembers, but he played with USC, was supposed to be a top 5 pick, ended up testing positive for weed for the week of the combine, and, you know, and it ends up getting docked however many spots. I think he ended up going in the very end of the first or top of the second round, but just been a guy that's continued to get busted for drugs and now getting suspended indefinitely. As with some of the Robert Kraft charges, a lot of people have kind of been speculating what's going to happen with Robert Kraft and what's going to happen. Is he going to be suspended? Is there going to be anything levied down on the Patriots? And God, for all the Patriots haters, you've heard them out there from Bart Scott saying that they need to do something to devastate the organization, take away the entire draft board. And, you know, you've heard other guys like Rob Parker say that they need to take the team away from the Krafts and all this. But there really hasn't been any type of precedent where you've punished the team like that for the actions of an owner. We've seen Jim Irsay go out there, you know, with a few lewd acts, you know, with tons of cash on him and lots of illegal drugs. And, you know, he got a personal suspension, but, you know, not much happened to the team there. But it is kind of crazy when you look at it and you say that pretty much all the top 3 pillars, really, of this dynasty, you know, Kraft, Belichick, and Brady, they've all really been tied up in a pretty big scandal. You know, Belichick was tied up in Spygate. Brady was tied up in Deflategate. And now Robert Kraft is going to kind of have this blemish on his resume as well. So for people who don't like the Pats, you know, there's definitely been a lot in the water this week to be able to, you know, swish away that Super Bowl victory. And you kind of wonder the state of the organization going forward. But I think a lot of people have taken it a little bit too far when you talk about, you know, taking the team away or anything like that. You know, it's just, you know, you certainly see how he should be punished kind of in terms of the law, but if the team was taken away, you know, I just think that would set some kind of, you know, that would just set, you know, some type of precedent that would be, you know, it's never happened before, so there'd really be nothing to say about it. They've never really punished the team based on the actions of an owner, and in this case, you know, obviously not, you know, trying to minimize human trafficking or anything like that, but there are a lot of people that, that solicit prostitution and, have to go through what happens if they get caught. And, it doesn't necessarily mean that you lose all your possessions if that happens. Or so, I don't know. Just one man's opinion in terms of, I don't know what's going to happen here. I definitely think Kraft, he'll probably get some type of 4-month, 6-month ban. I doubt he'll be able to lift the banner. But I don't know what's going to happen, because the police say that they have tape on him, and he is completely denying that. So if he's able to somehow, he just hired this big shot attorney. If he was able to use that attorney to somehow hold those tapes from getting out, maybe that changes things a little bit. But I don't know. Definitely just some interesting things, I think, for Myra Kraft, and it's got to be tough, and for her family, because she passed a few years ago. Right after that, Kraft is with some 21-year-old. After that, this comes up, so it's definitely not a good look for the organization. And a lot of people saying to get this over with quickly, because if you drag this out, all it is really just kind of, keeping the blemish on the Patriots. So it's interesting to see Robert Kraft, a guy that's been beloved by so many people, that's done so much good for so many people over the last few years. People kind of go, but this is the society we live in, and Robert Kraft, even though he's done so much good, you get caught doing the wrong thing on videotape, and you got to pay for it. So he's certainly going through that right now. And we'll kind of just see what happens here in Patriots Nation. But it's definitely an interesting time. But I don't think we need to worry about losing the team or anything along those lines. I think, like I said, the precedent, it just really isn't there. Jim Irsay has done things that have been much worse. And but again, the league does seem to punish the Patriots worse than they punish other people. So, and there literally is a rule that says that Roger Goodell can basically rule on anything in any way that he'd like. So when you have those things going for you, you don't really know what could ultimately be the end result. But we'll continue to see. And look, as this week, it sounds like the police at least say that the videotapes of Mr. Kraft are going to be out there. So, everybody in Patriots Nation and everybody around there, everybody who hates the Pats, probably even more excited. But, it's got to be the worst feeling if you're Kraft and you just get your phone blows up with like 10,000 text messages. You just know, God, they must have found. So, crazy stuff out of there as, the Celtics and Raptors tossing it back and forth. Going to have to check on the score there. And then another thing I wanted to talk about was Michael Crabtree continuing to have tough luck getting caught on with teams for some type of long period of time. Did well with the 49ers for a bit, did well with Oakland for a bit, comes in with Baltimore Ravens. You have any interest, if you're a Pats fan, in signing Michael Crabtree? I think that would actually be a pretty good signing. He's an older guy. He's not the best guy, but he's got pretty good hands, and he runs pretty crisp routes. That was always kind of his thing. So, almost kind of look at him as, potentially like a poor man's version of Deion Branch or something like that. So, I don't know, as he gets cut from the Ravens, and as the Patriots look for wide receiver help, is Michael Crabtree somebody that you want on your New England Patriots? I don't know. I think I'd definitely take a flyer on him. But that's going to do it for us here at Open Season. Coming to you again from Down the Road Brewery here in Everett. We'll be catching up with you, as always, every Tuesday at 9 o'clock, and we'll be hearing from you at 502-501-3477. From Mike, I'm Billy, and we'll talk to you later.